Hello and welcome back to another part in my series of videos where I'm showing you how to install different OSs on your Terramaster NAS. A number of you have purchased Terramaster because they are by far the most affordable network attached storage service provider out there in the market right now, providing some great hardware at very affordable prices. But some of you aren't as in love with the TOS software platform, you know, as others out there, and some of you who have become familiar from free open source and free NAS software out there on the market, or even low cost software, have been interested in getting the hardware of the Terramaster but using other operating systems. And in today's video I'm going to show you how to install the Linux version of TrueNAS, that's TrueNAS Scale, on a Terramaster NAS. And in today's video I'm going to go through all the little bits and bobs. I'm going to show you what you need, things and considerations you need to have, and of course the actual installation. Now, in the time of recording, I'm recording lots of different videos here showing you how to scale up the software on your Terramaster. This is the second one I'm recording in this series, but I don't know if they're all going to go out in that order. But in this video, the hardware that you're going to need is largely the same as all of the others. You're obviously going to need a Terramaster NAS. The Terramaster we're going for in this video is the F4423, the 2022 generation device, but as long as you've got a Terramaster that is at least a quad-core Intel-powered NAS and is released after 2020, very important because the CPUs that came before that point, even if they're Intel, aren't really that great for TrueNAS Scale, you know, in the grand scheme of things. Next, when you go for a Terramaster NAS, try to go for one that's got either an HDMI port on the rear or one that has an HDMI port inside. Most of the NAS that arrived after 2020 from Terramaster all have an HDMI port there on the rear or tucked inside. You're going to need access to that because installation of TrueNAS Scale is KVM based, keyboard, video, mouse. You're going to need both a keyboard to navigate the installation options, but you're also going to need a visual interface, an HDMI monitor there to connect so you can control the keyboard and go through the installation steps. Now, either have a monitor to hand or, like I'm going to be doing later on, use a capture card that will allow you to connect your system to an available computer and then set it up. After that point, you can always access it over the local area network. But for now, try to utilize an HDMI monitor or a capture card to interact with the device early doors. Next, you're going to need a little bit more memory. The majority of Terramaster NASs in their 2020 and above series either arrive with 4 or 8 gig of memory. Now, if you've got 8 gig of memory by default, you should be mostly okay. TrueNAS, whether it's Scale or Core, runs at its best with at least 8 gig of memory, but I would recommend a little bit more. Scale is slightly less aggressive in the hardware it's required compared with that of Core, but still nonetheless I would recommend 8 and potentially 16 or higher. This NAS I'm going for today arrives with 4 gig by default, and I'm going to be scaling it up with a crucial 16 gig module during an installation. Later on I am going to open this up to show you another stage of the installation, and that is replacing the little USB that's inside the majority of Terramaster NASs with a custom USB here, one that I'm going to be buying, and popping on the installation file for TrueNAS Scale. Pop in this USB inside this system, and then from there allowing us to get the Terramaster to boot into the installation for TrueNAS Scale and ultimately set up our TrueNAS Scale server system there. Now, I've gone for this USB largely because it is very small. The USB inside this is micro, it's tiny. You're going to need, I would recommend at least a 32 gig stick, but you can get away with a 16. It's not a particularly big installation file there, but still nonetheless, you want it to be recognized, you want it to be fast, and ultimately value for money wise, you can pick this USB up very cheap, something I'll show you later on. But for now, let's make our way over to the PC and I'll show you the files you need to download. Right, so we've made our way onto the desktop, and as you can see, this is the NAS that we are going to be utilizing for our TrueNAS Scale installation, the Terramaster F4423. And again, the reason I picked it is it's got itself a lovely little CPU there in the N5105, but as well as that, it arrives with 4 gig of memory that I plan on scaling up significantly in order to make the most of TrueNAS Scale on this system. And again, although it does have HDMI out, as it does state there on the listed connections and available ports. Do bear in mind, if you are utilizing a system that doesn't list it here, chances are if it's running an Intel Celeron-based processor, the HDMI is going to be inside there. Now, the first software we're going to need to download is known as Rufus. This is a completely free software that allows you to convert disk images, that is to say the kind of image that you would burn the old days. You'd use something like Nero or something like that, or Daemon. But now it is an image in the likes of an ISO or just an IMG that we're going to convert into a USB installation. And again, it's becoming a lot more trendy these days, given that optical media and disk drives are becoming few and far between. So you're going to need an application like this to convert the TrueNAS scale disk image into a USB form for the Terramaster to install. It's completely free, and I will walk you through the steps on how to do it shortly. Next up, you're going to need TrueNAS Scale, the installation of the Linux-based TrueNAS there, and you can download it directly from their website. You will have to supply a little bit of information in email form, but you can go ahead and get a live download link there, and it will download the file. I've already downloaded that and Rufus in advance. I'll show you those in just a moment. Now, once again, as mentioned, this is the USB that I am utilizing for today's video, the one I've got here, because it's incredibly small, and that is what we are looking for, a USB that will fit inside that Terramaster. In just a moment, I'm going to install it right there in front of you and show you exactly how easy it is. But again, it's knocking around for about $8. You could, if you chose to, maybe look at the larger capacities, but I wouldn't recommend it. Although the 64 gig is less than $2 more, because of FAT32 and because of the technique, chances are it will not be recognized by some Terramasters. So I do not recommend going for any USB that is larger than the one I'm showing you physically and larger than 32 gig, because you will hit problems there during the installation. Finally, there is the memory. I've already done a memory upgrade, because although this system arrives with 4 gig by default, I've scaled it up a little bit because TrueNAS can be something of a hungry beast in order to take advantage of all of the features. And although the Linux kernel version has differences in a number of ways versus TrueNAS Core, I think it would be remiss not to at least bump up that memory to have the smoothest experience. And then there are links to all of the downloads I've mentioned so far, as well as links to the products that I've mentioned so far that you're going to need, so you can check them out in the description. But what we need to do now is take our USB, pop it in the side of our system, and when you pop it in, do not be surprised if the system invites you to format the disk, because it's completely brand new. Do not format that disk. What you need to do is go into your downloads folder where you have downloaded Rufus, as I have done there. It is a portable exe, so it will open up directly from there, as you can see on screen, and it will scan for connected USB devices. If you have more than one USB connected to your system, I strongly recommend disconnecting all of them apart from the one that's being used for this installation, or take careful note of which drive it is. Now, if it doesn't appear here on this list, there's a chance that it needs to be initialized in the storage manager. Now, the step I'm going to show you is really something that's only available in Windows. I know Mac, you're going to have to use the disk utility, but if you go to the bottom here and look for computer management tools, not that one, accidentally clicking that. So if you type in computer management, then an option will appear there under computer management. Going in there, you can go into storage, into disk management, and then from disk management it will list the available disks, your OS drive and others, and chances are the USB will be there. It just may need to be right clicked and enabled if it's not already enabled, and you can disable and enable drives as you see fit. So just go ahead, right click, and you'll find an option there to enable the disk if need be. If it doesn't appear, head up here and then click refresh or rescan disks. After that, the disk should be available for you to play with. Now, make sure the disk is listed there, then go to select, and then from select, find the directory where you downloaded the image of TrueNAS Scale, something I've done here. Select TrueNAS Scale, go ahead and click open. It will now add it to the list of available drives there. Now, do remember that when you are doing this installation, that you do have the option of verification, and you can play with a number of these options, but I have not played with them. I'm running a default setup of Rufus, and I've not done any additional changes to the file format, and particularly do not change the file system. But from there, we're absolutely fine. We can go ahead and click start. It will then invite us to go ahead if we want to write it into DD mode, or if we want to go for ISO mode. Go with ISO mode. It's very important. But from there, click OK, and it will begin alerting you that it's going to delete the data first. But click OK, and it will now start burning it with the individual partitions that are needed for a Linux installation there on that disk image. It's very different to other out there. Anyone that's ever scanned a drive from a NAS just in a simple dock, or utilizing a disk utility, or even using diskpart, you'll know that there are many partitions created in a Linux folder structure, and particularly the partitions of the disk itself on the volumes that are being created there, so do bear that in mind. But from here, it should complete very quickly, and it should let us know that the job has finished any moment now, without making me look like a fool. If it could just finish, please. Oh, I really thought it would do it, didn't you? When it's done, it will let us know, and we can safely remove the USB via the taskbar there, and then afterwards we can remove that USB and get it started inside our Terramaster. Now again, I'm not sure what's getting this to take so long, but as we can see, it's now closing and finalizing it. So now it's done, we can go ahead and click close. From there, go to your taskbar and be sure to safely eject. If we safely eject, we've now got our USB safely ejected, and we can remove it. And now we can make our way back over to the Terramaster, and I'll show you exactly how and where we need to install this along with the memory in our Terramaster NAS. Let's go. Okay, so the physical installation portion of this is actually relatively simple, but do bear in mind that the steps I'm going through now apply to this 4-bay, and although they're going to be very similar to other Terramasters out there, do bear in mind that if you are using a larger or smaller NAS, then chances are things may be ever so slightly different. So again, you may have to differ ever so slightly in places. I'll try and keep you aware. Now, a few things to bear in mind straight away. One, these seem obvious, but make sure you disconnect power from this system during this portion. Not only because you might fry yourself, which is highly unlikely, but you never know, but two, you may hurt the components inside. Secondly, make sure you've removed any LAN connections as well. That's more because you might trip yourself up or pull the system out of the wall, which would be a real pain in the bum. But probably more important than anything is to remove your storage media. I already touched on earlier on that when you do this installation, it is going to format these drives. So just bear in mind when installing a third-party software that all that data is going to be gone, but particularly during this element of the installation, to remove those drives, because jostling the system will harm it. You don't have to give too much heed to the order of drives, because they're going to get formatted anyway. And as you can see, for this installation, I'm going ahead with a couple of 4TB WD Reds. But that's really it. As you can see inside this system, it's very hollow. But unlike a lot of other NAS brands out there, the components we need to access are inside. So we're going to need to start removing some of these elements. In the case of this NAS, we're going to have to remove all of the screws on the rear there, and perhaps one of the bottom ones. But again, it will differ depending on the system you are using. Another thing I've highlighted in other videos before is Terramaster actually supply a screwdriver with their system. Something, again, you don't really see many other brands doing. And that screwdriver, I've got to say, and I've mentioned it in other videos, is bloody good. It's a magnetic screwdriver that's included. So if you could find a screwdriver, good for you. But I would definitely recommend going for the one that they include with the system. It's a silly point, but still nonetheless very useful indeed. So we've got 3 of the screws. Let's get those out. So we've got one there. Get that out there. Again, I don't recommend battering your system like I am doing here. I'm merely doing that for the sake of brevity and getting the screw out as quick as I can. We'll get those other 2. And what we're going to do, or other 3 even, is we're going to slide the inside of this system out gingerly so we can access the internals. Now, for my installation, I am going to be upgrading the memory on this. You may not need to do that, but do bear that in mind that while you've got this open, now's a good time to upgrade that memory as well. What we're doing right now more than anything is replacing that USB. I do not recommend formatting that USB and overwriting it with the OS that you're choosing to use. That would be very damaging for the system, and overall you're then not going to be able to revert back to Terramaster if you need to. So again, do not format the USB that's inside. You'll only be harming yourself later. So there's our screws, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Pop that one with the others, then move that over there. So from here, we're able to remove the rear of the system. Now, there's a power cable that connects the fans at the top, but that installation inside there, that entire internal cage system can be slid out. So from here, we can go ahead and remove it. Take the fans if you can and angle them so you can thread them through the system. Sorry about the noise near the camera. And as you can see, we're going to remove the metal. So we'll remove that temporarily. Pop that over there. And if we have a little look inside, we can see several things. First and foremost, we've got our memory slots there on the bottom. And if we look casually on the other side, right there, we can see our USB. You see what I mean about the space point there? It is not very large at all. So what I'm going to do now is remove this USB like so. Pull it out there. And that is the USB with our Terramaster OS. Once again, I strongly recommend keeping this somewhere safe. In my case, I'm just going to pop that randomly on top there. But I will take care of it, I promise. Then you need to get the USB that we installed the installation software on earlier and then slot it into that available port. So we'll slot it in there like so. Make sure it's thoroughly in, because otherwise you're going to have to take this whole unit apart again. And as you can see, it's now installed there inside the casing. While I'm here, I'm also going to go ahead and install a memory upgrade inside this system. So I'm just going to do that there. I might fast forward this bit because it will be very dull to watch me desperately try to get my fingers inside this system. So let's fast forward now. Right, so the memory is done. So now we can start putting this back in the chassis. Do make sure you get it the right way round, because I have got that wrong several times in the past. So what we're going to do is get that lined up. And once again, we're going to thread it through the chassis, making sure that we've got it the right way round. So the idea is to have the word Terramaster heading with the T at the front of the chassis. And you can slide it in quite easily. It should go straight in like so. Okay, so the memory has been installed. So what we need to do now is to put this cage back inside. Do make sure when doing it, if you get lost, that the T is at the front of the device. So make sure you've got it face up with the T of Terramaster where you intend the front of the chassis to be. So thread it in down like that. I apologise for the noise that's going to come through the mic. And then just thread it through like so. Lift it up. And then it should slide in quite neatly. Again, watch your fingers as it goes in, because if you catch it there, you will scream. Once again, I apologise for the noise so close to the microphone. Then from there, you can go ahead and click it into place. Pop it there, slide it round. And it's a question of getting that alignment just right, because the cage is designed to be quite precise around the system. As you can see, it's now gone in all the way around. We can go ahead and get the rear of the chassis back on. Slide it on there, line it all up, and boom, we're clicked in into place there, as you can see. So what I'm going to do is get these screws back in here, and again, you can install them all inside. Just grab the right screwdriver there, and once you've done this, we can go ahead and start connecting our other peripherals. Once again, the peripherals that we're going to be utilizing here will depend on your setup. I personally am going to connect the HDMI there in case I encounter any problems. But when now you've got the USB inside, you should, in theory, have most of the work done. And the KVM setup later on is where things are going to get slightly tricksy. So what I'll do is I'll get all this put inside here, get our last screws in place. And then from there, I think I've missed one, I've missed the middle one. From there, we can go ahead and go with the software. Sorry for the padding in talking. I just want to make sure you guys can see everything that's being done. So now we're ready. We can get our drive media reinstalled. And again, do not be surprised, by the way, when you put the drives back in, if they get a little bit tough to put in, like that. The reason is that this metal chassis is kind of holding everything in place quite tightly. And the minute you take the system apart, it adds an element of kind of wobble, if you will, to the chassis design there. Not a huge amount, but it's enough that I've noticed whenever I've taken the outside of these Terramaster wraparound chassis off, I tend to find that this horrible noise is what happens when you put the drive media back in. It's clearly been wrapped in on a production line level there very, very tightly, but as you can see, as unpleasant as that noise is, it is unavoidable, get ready, because of the way we've now kind of mucked around with the rigidity of that chassis there. So again, now we can get our power reconnected, we can get our LAN reconnected, but what we're also going to be connecting, at least on my side, is our keyboard. And again, you may not need to do this if the boot goes correctly, except for if you are, of course, installing a TrueNAS system, in which case you are going to need that user interface. So that goes into one of the USBs, as you can see there. Pop that there on the side. And finally, you're going to need your graphical user interface. You're going to need your monitor or a capture card. But once again, I'm using a capture card here, which is then going to go into the rear of this, and my USB here going into my laptop. So what I'm going to do now is boot this system up from my side and go ahead and begin the installation of the software. So let's go ahead and hop over to the screen you're going to see. Okay, so I've switched over to a keyboard and video setup here with the Terramaster, so I'm interfacing with it directly via a capture device, and I'm going to go ahead and boot up this device. Bear in mind to make sure that you've got that USB inside your Terramaster NAS, that new one, but go ahead and reboot just like I'm doing right here. So when you do that, you will be provided with a standard kind of motherboard interface here. And depending on the Terramaster you have, it will differ ever so slightly. But as you can see, the TrueNAS scale installation has now been recognized there during our setup. So you can go ahead and just go ahead if you choose to just go straight ahead with the TrueNAS scale installation. Bear in mind while you're doing this that the target for a lot of this storage is going to differ just a little bit depending on your setup. So in my case, I am taking advantage of two 4TB drives inside this system. Now, it's also worth remembering that the target for the installation of TrueNAS scale is going to be different to that of the storage, something I'll talk about in just a moment. But for now, we're going to go ahead and click install. See, from here, it's now going to ask you where you want TrueNAS to live. Now, bear in mind that TrueNAS runs independently of the storage area you use. So in this case, I'm going to be selecting just a single one of those 4TB drives. So bear in mind that the perfect TrueNAS scale installation is going to provide you with a separate area for TrueNAS, ideally on an SSD or an NVMe, and the rest of the storage bays, those hard drives there, being their own storage containers, something I'll show you very briefly at the end of the video. But the installation I'm showing you here is not, repeat, not advised, because what I'm using right now is just a storage drive that's inside the system. If you have a NAS with NVMe slots inside, such as the newer generation Terramasters, or you have an available bay that you can stick in, like a really small 60 or 120 gig SSD, just for TrueNAS scale on its own, I strongly advise that. But as you can see, for now, I'm going to go ahead and click continue. As you can see, it's going to wipe that drive. As you can see, it's making sure that you utilize those storage media types. Don't use a USB due to power and performance issues, but for now, I'm going to go ahead and click installation. So for now, we're going to enter ourselves a password there. And bear in mind that the root username is just the word root, all in lowercase, something we'll talk about later on. You can choose not to set a password at all, but that would be ridiculous. And then from here, it's now going to move forward through the installation. A swap partition on the boot device can be useful if you want to reclaim storage space there, as well as set up a separate partition. So I'm going to go ahead and click yes, but that's really up to you. So as you can see, now it is slowly going through the process of creating our TrueNAS scale storage area. Now this will take a little bit of time depending on the system setup you have, and of course the available memory and the power of the CPU you're using. In the case of this quad-core processor I'm using here, it should be relatively quick. As you can see, we've already got to 17% extraction from the USB. I'm just going to fast forward a little bit there to the completion of this part of the installation, and I will remind you of this later, but do remember at the end of this installation to power down the device and remove that USB. I will remind you, but I just wanted to take this opportunity, just moving forward, just a little pokey reminder there. But let's fast forward to the completion of this extraction and the initial installation of TrueNAS Scale. As you can see, that installation is now completed there, so we can go ahead and click OK. So from here it will ask us to reboot or shut down. Now, I strongly recommend selecting the shut down option rather than the reboot. The reason being that we need to remove that USB device. The reason being, if we leave the USB inside this system, when we reboot it, what will happen is it will reinitialize the installation. Now, you can cancel out of that, but why risk it? So go ahead, select the shut down system option, and then remove that USB. I'm just going to quickly do that now, and then I'll welcome you back during the reinitialization of the system. Let's fast forward. Shutting down. I'm now rebooting the device, and from here it will go back in, but this time it won't read from the USB drive that I had because I've removed it. Now it will read from that TrueNAS Scale installation that I did earlier on. As you can see, there's the advanced options if we choose to, but for now we can boot straight in. If we don't touch anything, it will boot into TrueNAS Scale automatically. Now from this point, this is almost the end of utilizing the HDMI and keyboard interface here. We're almost there where we can just go ahead and start using desktop tools in order to get the job done. Now, when I talk about getting the job done, it's worth talking about maybe an extra little tool you may need along the way. Now, as you can see here, the user interface for the NAS isn't available on this IP. This is from a previous test I did. But the tool we need right now is known as Advanced IP Scanner. It's completely free, and it is a tool that will allow you to scan your local area network for devices that are available. And as the TrueNAS system boots, it will appear on this listing. So for example, if we go back into OBS where we're recording this and make the switcheroo back over to the NAS, we're able to see there on the screen that the full boot up of TrueNAS Scale hasn't finished. The ... thing you see here on screen just takes a little bit of time, once again depending on the power of the system you are running, but eventually on this screen it will let you know, I hate seagulls, when the installation has completed, and it will also tell you the root user IP that you can tap into the URL of your locally network attached PC or Mac in order to interact as a super user on the TrueNAS Scale system there. Alternatively, as mentioned, you can, after it's finished booting, take advantage of Advanced IP Scanner to find the NAS on your local area network. It is that straightforward, and from there you can start creating your storage areas, your volumes, your little containers there, maybe a few VMs along the way. That's all up to you. But for now, I'm just going to fast forward a moment to the completion of the startup of our TrueNAS Scale Terramaster NAS. And there you have it. The TrueNAS Scale server has completed, and although we can configure some of this via the console set up via HDMI, having a look at that IP as you can see there on screen, we now know the identity of 192.168.1.1 of our server there. So if we flick back onto the user interface there of our system, we can refresh that login there, perhaps get rid of UI session and go straight in there, and we're going to see the login for TrueNAS Scale. Identically, if we'd used IP Scanner, we could have scanned the local area network, and then after a couple of minutes, our TrueNAS Scale Terramaster NAS would have appeared. So for now, let's log into our system utilizing the credentials we created earlier. Which for me, if we log in, I've got to use wrong keyboard there, go to our local computer this time, and enter in our login information that we created. And then we're presented with our TrueNAS Scale user interface there. As you can see, we've still not created a storage pool yet, something I'll show you in just a moment. But this does allow you to access the full complement of abilities of TrueNAS Scale, the Linux version of the TrueNAS software. If we want to create a storage pool, click Storage, and from there, click Pool. Now, as you can see, once again, only one drive is available to be seen, and that's because I utilized one of the drives inside the system to be used as the residency of TrueNAS Scale. So once again, as I mentioned earlier in the video, TrueNAS Scale works at its best when TrueNAS Scale lives on an SSD that is separate from traditional hard drives there. So again, if you have NVMe storage bays, take advantage of those. Alternatively, use a very small scale, very affordable 30 to 40 pounds SSD that can hold TrueNAS Scale via one of those SATA ports, and then you can use the hard drive base for your larger storage area. But from there, go ahead and select the arrow to move it into that VDEV there, give it a name. You can give it a name there, so I can go ahead and just call this Scale Test, if I could reach my keyboard properly. From there, we can force it through because it's telling us because we haven't got any redundancy, it can be problematic. We can go ahead, click continue, and that will create our storage area there. But as you can see, it's going to wipe the drives and create our storage area. And then from there, pretty much the world is our oyster as far as TrueNAS Scale is concerned. All of the service abilities, everything from snapshots to enhanced container support and application support are ready and available for us to run TrueNAS Scale on our Terramaster NAS there. And again, you can minimize there, go into the App Center, select a target and more, all of which can be utilized on this storage platform and all of the other benefits of TrueNAS Scale. And we will be reviewing this platform very, very soon on an IX system server, so do stay tuned for that. But that is it. This has been how to install TrueNAS Scale, the Linux version of the popular software, on a Terramaster NAS. I hope you've enjoyed it. If you have, click like. If you want to learn more, click subscribe. And other than that, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time.